Bill Grile, chairman of the Governance Advisory Committee, declared during a public presentation before the Coos County Commissioner that commissioners are both administrators and policy legislators. Grile went on to state that the committee had concluded, but did not explain how the conclusion was reached, that commissioners could not perform both functions effectively. The committee uses this conclusion to reach another conclusion, that the county needs an administrator to free up time for the commissioners to work on critical policy matters. The committee never defines what these policy matters are. The Structure Advisory Committee also concluded the county needed an administrator to free up administrative time to allow the commissioners to go about the critical business of bringing revenue into the county. The committee doesn't mention what options the commissioners might pursue. Recently, I asked the commissioners to define the types of policy decisions they must make and how being freed from administrative duties would make this job easier.
Well, number one, it says that commissioners are both administrators and the policy legislators. So, first, can you give me an example of the types of policy that you have to set and how more time would be beneficial for each of those policies?
Well, I think a lot of the policy is critical to the county is our resource use, the protection of those resources and the use of those resources, how we go about that, how we develop leases around that, how we put protections in place. Policy as far as how we develop new revenue sources, how we deal with the state of Oregon, how we deal with the federal government. I think as far as what we're dealing with now, which you're really aware of the United budget, it commands a much greater presence from commissioners, both on the state level, the legislative level, and the federal level. I think the breadth of policy issues are so important to us, like things that may sound as simple as the expansion of our park system, but I think it's critical to us not only from a protection standpoint, but also from a revenue standpoint, to work very hard on that. That requires an awful lot of work with BLM and setting a new direction for the county. All of those things that we pursue, how are we going to go with our water resources? We're going to move forward with the water mitigation bank. Versus the day-to-day nuts and bolts of just administrative work. Do we fix the elevator on Thursday instead of Friday? Do we go with the whatever 500 phone system versus 600? Do we order toilet paper by the case and or the truckload?
Well, I would see that as more of an administrative issue than something that typically would be handled on department heads. But I was just trying to get a sense of, can I get it from the rest of you? What you consider a policy decision and how you maybe don't have adequate time to make policy decisions. I appreciate your input.
I've been married for 3.5 years. As I remember, we rarely set policy. We do a lot of work. We do a lot of direction to different departments. But as far as setting policy, it's rare to set a county policy. Most of what we work under are under the laws of the state of Oregon. We do have a county policy for personnel, as an example, and we've modified that a little bit over time. There's county policy and other things, but like policy attorneys look at solid waste policy, but we're not directly involved once they get that to us and make the decision. But as far as I'm concerned, that takes very little time, the policy part. Most of it is the direction when needed for our 24 or 30 departments that we have. And we sit like we did today and pass this, pass that. And basically what we do. As far as setting policy and just having that as our job as a advisory commissioner, if we have 5 advisory, 1 person, and 1 administrator, there would be a whole lot to do.
right?
Well, like once a month or something, I'd be there for half an hour. I guess I've got a different perspective on it in that we have our codes and policy manuals or volumes of those that haven't been addressed in 10 years. And in fact, a lot of them are sticky notes, full of sticky notes that have been added as time went on. There's a considerable amount of breadth of work there that needs to be done by this board just to get that updated and approved, and that, you know, that includes our zoning and land use situation, employee manuals, policy manuals. We really have no clear direction on buildings, equipment, that sort of thing, which we can see where we've had failures there, i.e. the solid waste thing. Past that, there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done on the funding side that is outside of administrative. We need to be out in the dialogue not only within the community but also at the state and federal level, that sort of thing. In addition to that, frankly, looking into the future, there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done between collaborative efforts with other governmental agencies.
Could you just give an example of a typical policy decision made on a daily basis? Handful of the policy decisions are made regularly. Since they're rare. Do you have?
Well, I
maybe reducing fees at
well,
policy.
I guess the best way to put it would be that it's an ongoing process, that as stuff comes to the board, it's going to have policy decisions. A lot of it is, and I think, frankly, in the past, one of the things that hasn't happened, and that's why it's more of a problem right now, is that there's been a lot of issues that haven't been addressed, and they just kind of sat there until they were in crisis. The idea is to not have to manage by crisis, to basically manage by your policy.
Well, I still have a second for assuming that an administrator takes over your administrative duties, what you're going to do with that time to bring in additional.
At this point in time, I don't believe there's a set plan. I think it's part of developing a strategic plan. But we also need to understand that we're right at the point.
None of the commissioners had a plan for how they would use their extra time to go about bringing in more revenue to the county. But at this point, Messerly reverses his support for a centralized power structure, the "let the buck stop here" meme promoted by a local paper, and now calls for a team that is more than just one person. Something, like we already have.
And part of that is building a management team that is more than just one person to be able to administrate and manage the process. So I think, the discussion, this process that we've been in for the last year has now got to the point where it has ended up with the Board of Commissioners, which is the end point that it needed to come to, and now our process in the next period of time is to deal with it.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
Well, thank you.
A couple of things were mentioned here about zoning. Zoning is set by the state, and we have to submit a plan, and our ordinance is all approved by the state board. It is not a policy. It is a law. We talked about employee manuals. We've updated those recently. We talked about a building policy. We have a maintenance policy already. And talking about solid waste and how it broke down. It's not a policy, it was my personal opinion, a conscious effort by a former manager to let it go. That doesn't have anything to do with policy.
I think we all kind of feel the same way. We took a great deal of pride in our governance group and how they went about it. And I honestly, you know, a lot of people said, weigh in, Cam, where are you on this? Well, I honestly did not know where it was on this when we started the process. And I wanted to walk through it just like the governance committee walked through it. And I did not provide them with any kind of a direction to get out of this, other than to review this thoroughly, to take a hard look at what we need. You know, many times people have said, well, you gentlemen are considering this because you can't do this. That's not the case. Any competent 3 women or 3 men could do this job very well, and they prove it again and again. But the gist of it came down to me is, do you want us doing the minutiae, the day-to-day minutiae, the nuts and bolts to keep the county going, or working on policy things that mean our future, that mean our continued revenue sources, that mean jobs development, that mean helping create policies that won't adversely affect us? And I got to tell you, quite honestly, I have to steal time. There's some the incredibly intricate review that ordinances need to be dealt with. Yet they're critical to the county, absolutely critical to the county. And I came to believe time that it was so important that we not only, I took a hard look at the governance committee's recommendation. And I really want to get to the point where I'm going to recommend a bit of a hybrid around what they recommended. Because I think it is important that we have an administrator, and I think for many reasons, if we have that administrator and we create 5 commissioners, and what I'm talking about is 5 commissioners that are elected at large, I think it will dramatically improve accessibility for the people of this county, and also dramatically improve representation. And we're not 1850 anymore, we're not 1950 anymore, we're not even 2000 anymore. And things are happening at such a rapid pace for counties, and you see counties going by the wayside. You see cities declaring bankruptcy. We don't want to be a part of that. We want to lead. We want to get out ahead of that. And I think we lead and we get out ahead of that by changing our fundamental form of government. I think that's how we adjust to the future. I don't think anybody here is looking back 100 years and saying, well, that's where we work together to diversify and create a new form of government. But you know what? The other thing I'm completely convinced of, and I've said this again and again, I have great faith in the people of this county. Truly have great faith in the people of this county. I've never felt that I'm any different than anybody sitting out there. I think Bob and Fred feel exactly this way, but I'm just hearing. I go back to maybe the poet of my end, Robert Burns, when he talked about what is the trappings of government or anything. I don't even let people call me Commissioner Barrett. I say, Cam, that's it, that too. And there are many things that we say, the buck stops here, we'll make those decisions. We are going to make those tough decisions.
May God have mercy on your soul.